them.
All right, give me a moment.
Hopefully they'll pop up within a minute here.
Okay, we are live, Travis.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Downtown Development Committee. We are expecting 2 more members. Bruce Zivic is not available to join us tonight. Let's begin tonight's meeting with a review of the minutes from our last meeting. I'd like a motion to approve, and then we can discuss them. Motion from Art.
So moved.
Second.
Second from Kim. Okay, any discussion on the minutes, questions, changes? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Approved. Okay, great. Let's move directly into the developers report. Dan, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Travis. Good evening, everybody. I think Rocky's on, but we can't see him, so I'm not.
Okay, I'll get him.
Okay, I'll start. I'm sure he'll jump in. So a couple updates because, sorry, a little background noise. Last evening, we had another planning board meeting. We've been chipping away at creating the lot for the American House Senior Living community. They actually visited last week from their home base in the Midwest, and we're super excited about the progress of the project. And they're also, I think, as excited as anybody about the downtown discussions. So we gave them an update on the committee work and where we're at. So just want to update the committee on that. I wouldn't be surprised if they, and we encourage it, kind of participate as this plays out, because they're obviously neighbors to the south, and also, you know, they have a lot of investment in terms of how it goes and how it lays out. So it's been positive lately. In terms of the planning board, they're eager to get updated by this committee. So I was thinking after our workshop, probably midsummer or so, we could update them as part of a planning board presentation. But the committee also might be thinking, or I would suggest, you know, at the right time, to provide some updates as well from maybe directly from the downtown committee or as a group, because they're certainly curious and will be kind of tasked with reviewing plans, obviously moving forward once they get out of committee and into development review. Innovation District continues to be hot, and we have a few more applications going in, which is super positive, and a lot of continued activity there. So we can continue to be pleased there. We're finalizing our state traffic permit. We'll likely have that finalized next week. We talked about that a bit at the last few meetings. So that continues to get close to the finish line, if you will. And we're working with Tom and the council on having a workshop to update the council on the status of it. There's a partnership that would be involved through the DOT and also the town. So we're eager to have that workshop hopefully later this month. And also, again, a little bit later on, we can update the committee as it relates to the committee's needs to understand that. And I guess lastly, and most importantly, we're working with our consultant, kind of getting to the place of having a meaningful presentation for this group on the 22nd. And we're increasingly getting excited about that workshop. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about kind of the format of the workshop later in this meeting. Our initial instincts are that, you know, maybe the first half of the workshop is presentation by us and the consultant. And then we should kind of talk through, of course, the input process and, you know, the format of the workshop following the initial presentation, and be assured that we've been continuing to send them, material the committee's generated, most particularly Tom, Brian, and Bruce's great work from last meeting. So they were impressed by the level of detail and the extent that your subcommittee went. So just wanted to pass that along, and they have that information. So that's my kind of update. And Rocky, feel free to fill in the blanks or add to our report.
I think you pretty well covered it, Dan. Obviously, we've been pretty busy. Got a lot of good things going. You folks probably are all well aware that the vaccine clinic has closed at Scarborough Downs. It was very successful. I guess over 90,000 people got vaccines. But having AINMED there and operating has really opened our eyes to, what could possibly happen with the grandstand. And we're excited about that. And so I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Thank you.
Rocky and Dan, we can talk offline, but are things going as you expect with Redico? Is there any issue that I need to be involved with? If there is, we can talk offline.
No, things are going well with Redico, and they're set to be submitting to the planning board for site plan review, I think by the end of this month. So they're
Great.
on track, and they visited, like I said, last week, and things have changed dramatically since they visited before in the fall. So they were super pleased with progress and excited about the project.
Good. Thank you.
I think just to add to that, they were really thrilled to see the different housing types and the mix that we have, and really didn't have a whole lot to offer when we asked for advice and what do you think? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And they really felt like they're seeing a lot that's being done right. And we're very, very pleased that the way that's, what's gotten done since they were on site last, and they feel like it's headed in the right direction. So that felt good to our team to have them, they're a national company, develop all over. And they were impressed with what they saw. So we were pleased.
Yeah, for any committee member, I encourage you to go through. It looks decidedly different now that many of those units are occupied, landscaping and lawn areas. It really is taking shape nicely.
Great, thank you guys. Karen, Scarborough SEDCO report.
Sure. I'm going to save most of my comments about the work that the committee is doing for later on in the agenda. I do want to say that thank you to all of those who went in and filled out your thoughts. They were incredible, and I feel guilty about summarizing them down. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But if you haven't put your thoughts in, definitely go ahead and add that. And again, there were just some beautiful pictures that people were creating with their words about what the downtown can be. So that's awesome. I did want to mention a couple of things. One, the SEDCO board is now starting to look at their economic development vision. The town is getting ready to look and perhaps vote on the comprehensive plan this month. And as SEDCO, we'll be taking the comprehensive plan and really doing more of a strategic analysis for ourselves in terms of what we need to be doing to be consistent with it. And we're also looking at the state's economic development plan because there are some very specific things with regard to really workers and the employee shortage. And we want to make sure we're understanding that report and what we can do to help.
Great. Are there any questions for the guys or for Karen about their presentations so far? Okay, seeing none. I know that none of the subcommittees met, or at least none of them had planned to. I did receive literally 10 minutes ago a message from Bill Donovan about the library expansions plans. So the trustees had commissioned its architects to do a comparison of the opportunities at the Downs, either at the grandstand or a new building site, with the present site of the library and an alternative site on the municipal campus as options. And the architects concluded that the present site was the most appropriate one to pursue. Last Thursday, the trustees had a long discussion about it and ultimately held a unanimous vote in support of maintaining the library at the present site, with a long discussion about what that means. But relevant to our work, it looks like the library trustees are not interested in pursuing the Downs for the library. So that's an update for the committee. I know it's something that we had spent some time talking to those folks on, and it appears that they're going to stay put with some different site plans in order to make best use of their footprint. So aside from that, unless anybody has received communications from the public or any other messages that they think are relevant for this portion, then I'm going to close discussion about subcommittees. Seeing none. Okay, so the bulk of our meeting tonight, we had talked about focusing on preparing for our meeting on the 22nd with Crossroads and with Goody Clancy. And Karen had done some work to combine the questions that she had prepared based on some of the work done before this committee came together and at the very beginning of the committee on what we were sort of tasked to look for, and combined it with some of the details that the modeling committee had put together, and created a list of questions that we turned into a Google Doc. And several of you over the past week have gone in and filled in your thoughts and have +1 other people's thoughts. And it generated a lot of, I thought, really useful comment for us to present to Dan and to Rocky and to Goody Clancy in 2 weeks. So I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who can talk about what you all wrote. I know we're going to lose Brian in about 15 minutes, but I do want to take just a minute to thank him for hopping in there first and for populating almost every question with a lot of great detail. It made it easier for me because I just had to +1 a bunch of Brian's comments. So I know we're going to lose him in about 15 minutes, but thanks, Brian, for going in there first. And you're very well represented tonight. So, so Karen, I'm going to ask you to take the floor and talk about what we all said. Karen did some great work, really rapidly this afternoon, condensing the dozen or so pages of feedback that we had produced into a couple of really nice, concise pages. So all credit to her on what she's going to present to you tonight. I'm going to hand it over to you, Karen.
Sure. Thank you very much. So again, I just want to say that my summary does not do justice to, I think, the way in which and the detail in which people describe things. But I was really just trying to get to some broad categories. And really what I want to do tonight is, number one, if you didn't get a chance to go in and put thoughts down, I want to make sure you've got a chance to add to this list of items that we have. And I also just want to see if there's some consensus about a couple of different types of items. Now I'm going to try to do 2 things here. Tom, I'm going to share my screen, I think.
We see it.
Great. And I was going to see if I could share the whiteboard too, but it doesn't look like it's going to let me do both. So we're just going to work with the summary piece, and I think Tom had a chance to send it all out to you. I just wanted to talk a couple of minutes about the existing conditions. I thought people said some really insightful things about how they view Scarborough right now. And really, one of the things that people said is Scarborough, unless you live here, it really feels like any town that you drive through. It's just things off a major roadway. And we've got a lot to offer, but as somebody expressed it, it's not really easily knowable. in terms of where you go and how you experience Scarborough. Because it's not really central, things aren't easy to find. And I think those were certainly great description of existing conditions and really thinking about what the downtown could do to really not necessarily fix it, but to go along with improving some of these ideas. And the other thing that people said in their comments when we asked about, hey, what do we need to do to think about changes in the landscape with respect to COVID, most people said, just take a deep breath. Don't worry too much about trying to be to react to the things that happened last year. So, nobody felt like we had to redesign everything that we've been thinking about in terms of a downtown in order to create different types of spaces. So then you started talking about authenticity. And this is one of the things I thought was really interesting. I think most people agreed that we don't need to try so hard to be, quote, authentic. We're a coastal New England town. We need to be, diverse, friendly, and I like that condensed is what someone said. And another image that people brought out, it was seafaring meets hunting cabin. And so one comment that actually wasn't in this section, but it was further down when it said, what's uniquely Scarborough? Well, it's where rural meets urban. And in fact, that's what the Downs is trying to define. And in its very first presentations, the Downs talked about that really window of urban meets rural. And this is where Scarborough is. So I want to stop for a moment and just ask how people think about this sense of authenticity. Did these statements ring true to you? And I'm going to start with Brian since he has to leave.
Karen, I think maybe as I think about the coastal parts of our town, those things ring a little bit true. But not to be down on Scarborough, but it feels kind of plain to me. It feels kind of everywhere as it stands, and so I don't know that there's anything that really sets it apart for me to be authentic about. But I think these are aspirational, aspirational elements of authenticity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you feel comfortable that, as long as they're on the right track of respecting sort of, New England architecture, New England view of a coastal town, then we don't need to try that hard to define it. Does anybody else have thoughts or a different opinion on that?
I do, Karen, if I can jump in.
Sure, Tom, hi.
Hi, nice to see you again. I think I came a little late to the spreadsheet and I did make a few notes. And when this kind of question came up, one of the thoughts I had was, I think the consensus throughout that document was that Scarborough kind of feels potentially like any town USA on the coast. But maybe some of this authenticity could be derived more from the history of the land upon which the downtown's being built, namely Scarborough Downs. I think there's some history, especially if we are going to be retaining the grandstand, that we can carry forward and potentially, even if it doesn't reflect the entirety of the community, potentially reflects maybe a little bit more of a narrow history within the space where this downtown's being built. And there is an opportunity here, I think, for this downtown potentially to provide a little, reflect a little authenticity back to the rest of the area, where this could actually be a little bit of a defining, part of Scarborough's existence, and therefore, help sort of lead the way to, defining what the greater area and how it differentiates itself from the region.
Karen, one of the things about Scarborough that kind of strikes me is that it once upon a time was farmland, and and once upon a recent time got developed. And as I think about it, the big unfortunate thing is that it's a bunch of cul-de-sacs and dead ends.
Yeah.
With houses that all kind of look the same. That, you know, with you know, respect to everybody on the phone now, they were developed by the same handful of developers from the region. So like there's not this collection of houses from the 1800s, or it's a collection of houses from the 1990s and later, that are all kind of pseudo-colonial in style. So I think when you said we don't need to try so hard, yeah, I think that rings true to me, or that's important to not be, the phrase simulacra. Don't pretend to be something. Be something real, or create something authentic rather than referring to something.
I think I completely agree with you, Brian, on this, because I have moved to Scarborough. This is my 10th or 11th year, but a lot of my friends came from different parts of US. But when they come, and then if say, okay, what is the place? And then I always go to the areas which are outside of Scarborough, but we are very centrally located for everything. And then we have a very good community. People are very nice, and we respect each other and everything. All that aspects are really good, and we are close to a lot of things. But I think we have a huge potential to create something new and something unique, rather than relying on trying to get something. So I totally get your point. Like, we have a very huge opportunity right now, that we can call, okay, Scarborough means probably this. We can actually correlate like a brand. So that's opportunity is there in front of us. I don't think we have it until now. And then Downs, I agree. And another aspect of Tom's point, where we had Scarborough Downs, and then I only know, see, I'm an outsider, right? When I'm seeing Scarborough Downs, like, okay, I don't do horse racing, I don't do gambling or anything. So why do I need to go? In my last 11 years, I only went once. No offense to anybody, but I'm talking about myself. I only went once in my last 11 years in the Scarborough, until the Downs was started building. Then I started going and exploring. So I think Bruce has a one point about Scarborough Downs. Probably I think, Brian, you also. We have some good and some negative feedback about that area. So we have to be mindful of how we represent that specific point of view. But those are all specific to my opinion totally. So I do not want to harm anybody's opinions or feelings. I respect everybody's opinion, but I want to be respectful. That's completely my thought process.
Nope, that's what this discussion is for, to just sort of hash things out and talk about them.
Cool. Yeah, and at the same time, I want to be mindful, like I'm not hurting anyone's feelings. So if I do, I'm really sorry for that.
Yeah, I think building on that, there's some truth to the fact that if you weren't from around here until the mid to late 80s, you knew about Scarborough because there was a horse track here. At the same time, moving forward, there isn't anymore. And I think it would be weird to promote the Downs with a horse track theme because there isn't one. It's not the product that we put out, that we continue to put out. It was the main economic draw to the town a long time ago. And we've watched it slowly die over the past 2 decades. And I think that there are plenty of reasons to maybe not feel too bad about that. So it seems strange to me to build an identity around an industry that doesn't exist here anymore. So I tend to agree that it's kind of an opportunity to, yeah, of course, name some streets after racetrack themes, and maybe have some kind of memorabilia that represents what used to be there at the grandstand. But beyond that, I do think it's kind of an opportunity for us to say, what do we want to be from here on out? What's that, what's the thing that we want to define ourselves by now that we don't have a horse track anymore?
I would argue that it's almost a celebration that maybe this is something we can move on from.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up here.
One thing I think I don't. It's more of an obstacle, I think, than a theme or authenticity. But geographically, Scarborough is so big that having some kind of, and it really does feel like a collection of neighborhoods sometimes. You know, you've got like the Pine Point area, you've got the Black Point area, you've got the Pleasant Hill area, you've got the Eight Corners area. I feel like we want to create something that is a draw to people from all corners of Scarborough. I mean, there's some parts of Scarborough you actually leave Scarborough, go to Gorham, and go back into Scarborough. I mean, like, we need a draw. We need something that people are going to come to this downtown, go out of their way to come to the downtown.
I was going to say, we certainly heard a lot of that discussion in the comprehensive plan meetings, where people identified more with their neighborhood than with the town as a whole. So anybody else want to add to this authenticity discussion and our talk about branding? Okay. Dan, Rocky, do you want to weigh in at all on these types of themes and what you guys are thinking of with respect to the racetrack?
I'll jump in. I think we want a Scarborough identity. We don't want a racetrack identity. And that's what I've thought from day one. I do think it's kind of neat to have some horse themed road names, Front Runner and those types of things. I think make sense. We always, anytime we've ever developed anything, we always try to have some historical factor in naming, just out of respect to the land and to what it was used for. I think that makes sense. But I think that, we don't really want to develop a Scarborough Downs center. We want to develop a center of Scarborough, and we are fortunate that we are the geographic center of town. So that's, it's the right spot for it. The whole trick to this thing, I think, is going to be figuring out, what can work. That's going to be the trick, figuring out, how much commercial space, how many restaurants, how many office space, how many residential units. But the feel ought to be, this is the center of Scarborough, in my opinion. And I've probably said too much.
Yeah, I was just going to say something a lot shorter and sweeter. I don't know if it's sweet, but, in my time working for Scarborough, the term "there's no there" has come up a handful of times. Like, there's no there in Scarborough, like there is in a lot of communities. So I would say we want to create the there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I might be ripping this off from somewhere, so apologies to whoever I'm ripping it off from, but the downtown is to Scarborough what Scarborough is to its surrounding communities, which is it's the place where the woods meet the water. So it seems like that sense of the LL Bean home store, which is a combination of coastal and woods, and how they commingle, is a summary of both sides of our community, and of what combines the Gorham and Buxton and surrounding towns, if we're the connective tissue between the rural woodsy part of Maine where there are hunting cabins and the coast where you get a lobster roll. How do we represent that in one spot? That's sort of, to my mind, if we're looking for theme, it's where the woods and water meet together.
Well, any other thoughts that we want to add to this?
No offense, Tom, but that's also a really good beer, just to mention.
Not offended at all.
Is that what I stole it from?
One of Tom's competitors, yeah.
You mean Woods and Waters, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Main beer
I guess
company.
I was thinking
About
of,
beer.
I was thinking of the monument, not the beer. The beer ripped off the monument. I ripped off both.
Well, leading off of that discussion of some branding, we did talk about, or people talked about signage and streetscape. And one of the things that I think we wanted to know clearly is, we've got some existing wayfinding signs and some branding on that. And the question to the group was, is the streetscape or is the signage within the Downs something brand new, or does it relate to the existing signage? And so far what people have said is, we want to relate to the existing signage in themes, doesn't have to be copying, but we want to relate to that because we want people to understand that the Downs, this main street is Scarborough's main street. It's not, you're going to the Downs. It has to have both identities. And so I guess I want to put that out there and talk about the relationship of signage in the downtown. I don't think we're really talking yet about, trails and things like that, but the signage and wayfinding within, within the Main Street area. What does that look like, and how does that relate to existing signage? So I actually might go to Dan and Rocky first on this to ask them, do you guys have, how do you feel about that distinction, wanting to be Scarborough, not the Downs, so making sure that there's a understanding that this is public?
I can go first. I haven't given a ton of thought, Karen. I am partial to the town signage because I worked with you and Tom on it, but I think it's cool. But there's also something really important to the Downs in terms of the Route 1 signage, in the theme of that signage, in the project's identity. And so ensuring that signage and branding appeal to not only the community, but also businesses and visitors from the region, I think is pretty important. So I guess I'm just thinking out loud, but I think blending the two would be, I guess, my preference at quick reaction versus the Downs assuming sort of the town's kind of wayfinding signage as it. And I'm not suggesting you're doing that entirely, but
Right.
So I'll stop there.
I had a question for, I guess, Dan and Rocky. You've already started some signage with, I guess, innovation and the residential components. Do you see the need to be consistent throughout the entire project, to have a consistent theme or aesthetic in that regard, or do you see the downtown being separate and distinct potentially?
We have a Downs logo that I'm sure you're aware of, and that's been, the intention is for that to carry in a modest way throughout the project. And it's on signage in the residential phase, but it's secondary. It's not super prominent. What is prominent is the name of, say, the apartment complex, or the particular development within the project, the name of the condos or housing, etc. And we're trying to actually vary that aesthetic as it relates to the parts of the project where we're actually really calling them neighborhoods within the project. Like we have neighborhoods or districts. Kim's in Mill Commons, which is different from, the Front Runner Park, which is currently under construction and people are occupying. So the signage is gonna aesthetically kind of look different, just to have neighborhood identities. I think, and certainly the downtown will be different from that. And I think that's the downtown, I think, is what you, obviously this committee's talking about, and having more of a Scarborough municipal, what have you, identity, I think would be fine. We just need to kind of figure out what that is. And blend it with some branding for the project as well, is my opinion on it.
I'm trying to recall the aesthetic. It seems to be, and these are only in a couple places so far, kind of a masonry stone low wall with kind of silver lettering. Am I recalling that correctly?
It's black lettering.
Black lettering.
It is more of field stone, or, you know, it's not masonry. You might be thinking of the sitting walls at Innovation. Innovation are actually concrete board form. So we have these low concrete walls that fit the character of Innovation District as kind of a industrial
chic or something. It seems a more modern design than.
It is. And we try to correspond that with the building design, the character of Innovation, which is very different than, you know, Mill Commons, which is a more traditional neighborhood design. So that's why we're working on materials to kind of vary the identities of the neighborhoods, but tying together the downs. Go ahead, Rocky.
Tell them what you're doing for the Front Runner Park. May as well throw it out there.
Front Runner Park, we're planning on doing Gabion, or Gabion, however you pronounce it. I've heard both. Walls where it'll be stone within basically wire cages.
Rocks and chain link. Come on, guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be awesome. The example is the the Front Runner Park. We did really kind of amphitheater walls with Gabions, playing off that, and we think it's gonna look pretty good.
But tying, different neighborhoods with different looks.
Right. So I guess to the point at hand, the downtown could adopt and will likely adopt its own aesthetic in some respects. There'll be
absolutely
some common themes that carry through. So I think it'll be interesting to hear from the consultants. I don't know if they're that fine grained or will be by the time we meet, is, you know, kind of building design and that sort of, you know, back to the authenticity. That is it going to be coastal New England look, or is it going to be kind of modern architecture? Maybe the grandstand is what dictates.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing that was also true in the comments was certainly that, you know, the signage and then street furniture and lighting, all of that is crucial to the Main Street area. You know, so how that gets developed, you know, I think it sounds like from the comments that that's just critically important to the feeling and the concept of the Main Street area. And one of the comments that did come up a lot was this, you know, sense of this downtown is going to feel really safe. And it's going to feel safe because it's, you know, well lit, clear signage, all of those things that really make people feel comfortable in an area. And the other thing that we can't forget is, as I think someone pointed out, we're going to need to redo some of our signs, because obviously on the signs that are out on Route 1 and different intersections, we're going to want to point people back to the Main Street. And then that brought up another question is, I don't think we can answer the question tonight, but what would we put on that sign? Is it downtown? Is it Main Street? Is it, you know, town village center, town center? I think that's a full discussion right there in terms of what that's going to be. But essentially, you know, those signs at on Route 1 and Black Point Road, where they point to Oak Hill one way, what are we going to say when we're trying to point people this direction? So let's talk a little bit more about, the gathering spaces. And I've lumped a lot of different things under this. Part of it is what people are thinking about within the public space. Part of this is what's going to attract people to this area. And I think people had some really clear ideas about what's going to be important. But the first thing that people talked about was that whatever public spaces we have, they need to be intensely used, but still create room for some spontaneous events. And we asked people to think about like Memorial Park versus this space. And people were really clear. Memorial Park is a park. The community space or the public area here, it's not a traditional park. It's a green. It's for activity and all different types of uses. And it's ringed by this commercial activity, which is completely different than what Memorial Park is. And so part of that is, reminding us the space is not a park, and the public spaces at the Downs should be, and I like the term, collision points with multiple activities where you're meeting your neighbors and seeing people spontaneously. And, certainly people talked about, tables, benches, and but the important piece was multiple reasons to be downtown. And that's what the gathering space is going to be. That's how you're going to run into not just your neighbor from your neighborhood, but your neighbor from the other part of Scarborough. So that's why this sense of what a gathering space could be is really important. Was a lot of talk about having a kids zone, splash pads, and then the activities, skating rinks, a holiday market, pop-up fitness classes. And then we did ask people to distinguish us. What does Portland's downtown feel like? And then what do you want Scarborough's Main Street to feel like? And people really felt that Portland's downtown felt very adult. And Scarborough's downtown needs to appeal to all ages. And it does need to be not just kid-friendly, it needs to be adult-friendly and kid-friendly. So it's got to find that right blend. And that's the mix that will make Scarborough work. So I'm going to stop for a second and see what people think about this list and whether or not there are other things we should be talking about that will create this gathering space that we're talking about.
Karen, did you get the sense that gathering space is kind of an open green area that's reserved for public purposes? It's combined a bit. I think most people were thinking that, but really when we were talking about gathering spaces, I think we were talking about both occurrences, what happens in the public spaces, but also what draws people in to Main Street so that you have those interactions with your neighbors or with your fellow Scarborough. Yeah, I see it can mean both things for sure.
Yeah.
So Dan and Rocky, this notion of a green space with nothing built on it, or very little, if you will, is that something that's been part of your conversations with the consultant?
Yes. Our considerations, I think, are pretty consistent with many of these bullets. Central location ringed by commerce maybe is the best, easiest characterization as to what kind of jumps off the page here.
So is it
the green space is activated on all sides so that it's usable by the public, usable kind of in a kind of free range way, but commerce is benefiting from it, around it, and engaging with it, is if that helps describe.
Yep. And more than likely it would be located at one end or the other of the Main Street, not in the middle of it, but having commerce on all sides of it.
Sort of like a public square. I think that's kind of where my head was. just maybe green as opposed to paved or something.
And I don't have any sense of size, to make it practically usable and viable.
Our consultant's going to be offering some benchmarks, and also I think it's Tom's work with the modeling committee dug into that pretty deep too. I was impressed by sort of understanding that the benchmarks there. So it seemed like the lesson from that exercise was it's quality potentially more than quantity, or it's the design, it's the programming, and the location perhaps more than square footage, for example.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate that this real estate is probably your highest valued real estate on the whole property. So size matters to you. But by the same token, we're going to have one shot. So let's make sure we reserve enough space that it's viable and usable for the sorts of things that we're talking about.
Tom, it looks like you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to look at I know because like you just mentioned, Tom, that this is sort of a high value area. I think it is important to maybe mention that, looking at this with my sort of, business owner cap on, having the green space, I think is going to also offer a unique opportunity for, the potential commercial tenants who move in, because there aren't a lot of spaces that could possibly have, a green space like that can offer programming that would attract potential customers, for something like a farmer's market or maybe any of the other things that could take place in that green space. So sort of as a business owner, knowing that there's opportunities that are going to be, there will be opportunities for customers to essentially show up for these other events, and then we could benefit from that drag business, I think is potentially going to be unique to this location, depending on how much square footage there ends up being there. So I do in some ways see that potentially benefiting everyone, developer and the public together, because, that could potentially lend itself to a higher demand on the commercial side. People like myself, if I knew that there, every Wednesday and Saturday there was going to be an influx of an extra 1,000 people that wouldn't be there otherwise, that's a perk. So it could be kind of seen through that lens potentially as well.
So potentially premium lease or sales around that fixture.
Right. Yeah, it would certainly make this a more interesting prospect to move your business to than potentially competitive neighborhoods, outside of Scarborough that might be offering similar square footage. I would see that as a definite bonus. No, if I knew that there was going to be quality programming and events being held in that space.
Then our consultant said to us actually is that a larger green space can be a drawback because you may not actually get gathering. Like it can be uncomfortably big, and you may not want to walk across it to see your neighbor or go to that restaurant or whatever it might be. Not to beat on Memorial Park, but I think that's Memorial Park has that challenge and also doesn't have sort of activity around it. And it in part's trying to do other things. So perhaps that's not direct criticism, but I think if you can experience it that way to get a sense for us not wanting something of that scale for those reasons.
And that type of programming doesn't have to happen in a large square foot green space. I mean, you could do an art walk with vendors just right on the sidewalks and things like that too. There's other ways to utilize the available space. So I could see sort of arguments in both ways. I just think that having the opportunity to draw in folks that wouldn't be there otherwise would be a benefit to the businesses.
Well, just think of the farmers market that occurs just in the front parking lot of Town Hall, just in terms of scale.
Okay. And I just want to remind people that I can't necessarily see everybody on my screen. So just shout out if you've got something to say. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add to this discussion in that, I was lucky enough recently to live in London for a couple of years. And one of the things that I loved most about it is that the neighborhoods around it all had what was called a common in the center of their little neighborhood with businesses and pubs and everything around it. But it wasn't just a green space. There was paths that were crossing in between it. And, you know, every common was different, but in one common, maybe you'd have a little pond in one corner and a playground in another. And so it wasn't just a place where you'd go and stay. There was people moving throughout it as well. So it was almost part of the interconnectivity in the center of the town. But it wouldn't ever be sort of consumed by one program. There was lots of things that could happen there at once, and they weren't that big of a space either. So, but I also just really like the term common, and I think it ties in a lot of what we're trying to, what we're talking about.
So on that same topic, what Sarah has said, like if you consider at this point of time in the current Scarborough, other than the high school, that those playground in front of that Bank of America, the Hannaford area, that municipal complex, where we generally do the Scarborough Summer Fest. So if the kids are using those playgrounds, if you wanted to have some kind of an event, business driven or something else, is there anything else in the current Scarborough that can accommodate that type of thing? I don't know about the farmers market. It happens on the weekends, but that is basically municipal complex parking spot and everything in the regular timings. So the green space should be utilized for all of these purposes also. At the same time, when the high school kids are using the sports activities going on, we can have some kind of a business event driven, which we can utilize for the green space can be, you know, converted into use for those purposes. So that is how it cannot be like 5-6 acres, like bigger the stadium like of thing, but it can have a mix of lot of things. Like one corner has maybe children's play area, and another corner has something else. Like we can come up with a lot of those ideas, but the green space should accommodate all of those aspects of it.
That's something that people talked about over and over, that you know, there's this wide variety of activities and mixes that are going to make this Main Street work. And it's not just the mix of the programming, it's the mix of the businesses and how the businesses interact. And so I think people are really looking forward to, you know, helping this mix of uses and purposes come together. Okay, and I do have to say I know in general, the committee is not really focused on defining uses, but people did seem to be really excited if we can find a bakery and a bookstore seem to very much add some excitement. And those are two things that certainly would be an attraction to the Downs. So when we talk about transportation and walkability, really people talked about just a couple of things. When I asked them what walkability means, you know, it really is that separation from cars, and I think and wide sidewalks. And so I think the committee is going to be really interested to see what the design consultant is thinking about with respect to how this separation, or how people become or feel safe. And that word kept coming up a lot in some of the descriptions. How do people feel safe on the sidewalks and walking from point to point? And there was some discussion of, you know, the green space and feeling comfortable about walking through to the other side. Again, less conflict with cars that way. But there were a couple of other things. Somebody was suggesting there should be some bicycle taxis, you know, carting people around, and maybe from neighborhood to downtown, the neighborhoods to the downtown. There certainly was discussion about, you know, would a shuttle be an effective amenity for the area? And I think most people felt like maybe a shuttle within the Downs, but probably not a shuttle that goes to other places in Scarborough. And so I might ask some of the folks within who are living in the Downs, how you think about walkability within the Downs and whether or not a shuttle or something like that would be useful.
I think, I mean, we walk it all the time. We walk from Mill Commons all the way up to the clubhouse and all the way up into the Innovation District all the time. But there are a variety of ages and abilities. And I do think something to get people downtown where they wouldn't have to get in their car and drive would be a good thing to have, in my opinion. Good bike lanes might be helpful, would be great. And I came up with the bicycle taxis because I've used those in DC and in Boston, and you know, it's a cool thing in the summer. You know, might keep me in shape. I'm not sure, but I do think that there, and I even I'm a bit of an advocate of shuttles up to maybe Oak Hill, like to the grocery store. If there's no market down here, like just to the grocery store. You know, we've walked up to Hannaford before. And that it's not bad in the fall or the spring or the summer, but it's not great in the winter. You just can't get up Route 1. And it's, you know, it's a half a mile up the road or a mile up the road. So if I don't need to drive, I'd rather not.
And that the walk along Route 1 was mentioned a couple of times as people not feeling safe.
There's a stretch that has no sidewalk. So as you leave, and I know Dan and Rocky have talked about this, at some point in the future that will be resolved. But you can't get up there in the winter. It's really bad. And even at 5 o'clock, you're in the breakdown lane. It's pretty scary. And even walking up the sidewalk from Millbrook up to the municipal campus, it's not a wide sidewalk. And I mean, if you think people are going like 50, 60 miles an hour, and it's a little intimidating.
And then I would, and then for the Route 1 walking, definitely it is not, basically if I am going with my son for the biking, definitely I would never go with even though we have a sidewalk, I would never go there because it's a very busy road with a lot of cars going back and forth. For just a second, if the kid goes off the road, then you are on the main road, going through the oncoming traffic, not safe at all. Maybe in the daytime it is still okay, but not definitely. I would not, at least I would not take my kids on to the Route 1 on the sidewalks. Maybe I would use a different path if I have to navigate between downtown versus any other area other than the Route 1. I mean, that's my preference.
And just to give a sense of timing, the sidewalk connection plan to Sawgrass would in all likelihood be in 2022. And then the Route 1 sidewalk would be in 2023.
I do, just because it's 7:30, I want to keep our focus framed on the downtown itself. And so when we're talking about things like shuttles and sidewalks and public transportation, I think our focus is the idea of either getting people to the downtown or getting people from the downtown to a place that they need to go. But I just want to make sure that we're staying focused on the downtown itself, just because I know we still have a bunch of bullets left to go and not a lot of time left tonight.
Thanks. So let's talk about themes. I mean, I think we've been talking about it all along, but some folks are really excited about, this concept of sustainability. Can we use sustainability in the branding? Is there something unique that we can do with that? And someone suggested perhaps there's even a consultant that could come in and do some work on what a sustainable downtown would look like. There was also some excitement around the concept of, Maine-made products, and not that we can only have Maine-made product uses in the downtown, but thinking about that as a theme in programming and, even getting some of the merchants to maybe have Maine-made product areas. Those types of things seem to be pretty exciting for people. And then there was a lot of discussion around community art, that the community art can really play a role in defining the space and talking about Scarborough and really doing some of the things that I think the committee saw that they described at the last meeting that happens in other places, whether it's statues or other types of art or a sensory experience. The art is really important, but it's not going to happen on its own. And so that's something that's going to have to be programmed and or thought through. How do you raise money for public art? How do you start to program public art within a community? So I'll stop there and see if there's other things that we should talk about with respect to programming and themes within the area.
I guess I'll just say on the sustainability point, it's so rare that you get to build a town on a blank slate in 2021. And I think that there might be a lot of interest on the investment side for some creative sustainability stuff. And there are people who know how to leverage every single state and federal dollar. Mm-hmm. I remember spotting a grant, I don't know, what was it, Karen, maybe a year ago, about distributed energy on new large developments that I think we had talked about, and we just didn't know who on earth could possibly take it up.
Getting your water.
But that kind of thing, you know, bringing in somebody who knows how to identify those things could actually yield sustainability tourism and some really cool things that could make us stand out as a leader, state and nationwide. It's such a rare opportunity to build something like that from scratch. So I thought, you know, I have a responsibility at least to mention that there are people who might be really good at helping to capitalize on some of those opportunities.
Any other thoughts?
Speaking to the art role, I think, Karen, briefly, as part of the work we were doing on the modeling committee, some of the notes that I had mentioned to me through that research made the point to note that it is important to capitalize on the experience of the customer sort of outside of the four walls of the shops and dining and those types of points, and really sort of being able to engage the senses of the customers while they're sort of on the street is also quite important for the space, whether that's through the architecture or the theming, but also maybe the arts and the installations can sort of add to that as well. I think some of the best places that are able to sort of be memorable for folks are the ones that have sort of the full sensory experience, even while they're outside of some of the retailers. If you smell hot dogs coming off of a cart and you see great lighting and there's fountains and any way to sort of engage the senses while you're outside, I think would be a benefit, and tying the arts in could certainly play a role there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. So there should be maybe a place where it can be unique as a architecture or something like that, where it is a photo opportunity for the people. Like, okay, if I'm coming there, oh, that is the place I want to go and capture the picture. Definitely. Like how the Portland Headlights comes, right? Mm-hmm. So we should have some, I mean, I'm maybe abroad, but that is something one. And then the second one is there was a line item above about the wall art. Maybe recent times, I think what I remember is the Westbrook did research sometime back, involve the community to come and then draw it on the streets or something. Maybe we can, if there is an opportunity in some of those areas, it may be widespread across the downs, where we can involve the community who are artists or the drawings or painters. Maybe they can come and show their local art. It may not be a permanent, maybe it can be there for some time. That way we can get the buy-in from the community, involvement also in and around Maine, or maybe if you want to be specific, maybe Scarborough or something like that. So get the artist and then come in and do something, and that can be used as a display. And maybe those people can bring in more people, the chain reaction. So those type of things maybe those are some of those ideas that came into my mind when we were talking about the theme and the art. But I would definitely like to have the photo opportunity and then I would proudly present everywhere, and I broadcast in India everywhere.
I think that's a good point, Basha. We're living in the Instagram age, and if we don't maybe capitalize on that, we might be doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice. I think it's important to note how powerful that pair of angel's wings is on the side of the Holy Donut building in terms of people taking pictures of themselves and putting it all over the internet, and therefore attracting more people. So I wouldn't say it should be our priority, but it shouldn't be something that we ignore either.
And I think what a lot of people are saying, it's not going to happen on its own. You've got to be mindful about doing this or inviting the art in. And I think someone said in the description, that Scarborough, what you want to do is be able to take a picture like during each season and know that you're in Scarborough. So some area like that, that is very distinctive. So anything else on themes and art or sustainability or any of these ideas? Okay, moving on. Then we talked about how we're going to know if we're successful. And there are a lot of different ways to look at this. And so, one of the things, measures of success that people said was it's a place that is enjoyed locally. If residents come into the area and are enjoying it, that's a success. A place that's safe for people to come, that's a success. Activities and businesses are interesting to a wide variety of people. The fact that we've appealed to a broad spectrum of age groups and, urban, suburban, rural, all sorts of ways of looking at things, that's going to define success. And this is where it is, where you can take a picture in all 4 seasons and know that you're in Scarborough. A place that's written about, a place that piques the curiosity of people from away, where there are activities day and night. And one thing that somebody was very clear about, businesses have to be successful, and that keeps them staying in the downtown area. So we want them to be successful. And somebody else talked about, milestones like the downtown or the Main Street. That's going to take a while to develop. What are some things that we can do to bring people to the area, before we're, quote, done? And somebody was saying food trucks or just events all along the way as we lead up to really making this very vibrant area. And certainly how much we use the grandstands for community events and things like that. That's another measure of success. So can I ask, does anybody want to add to this list about what is a measure of success from a community standpoint?
I'll just jump in that I think that idea of finding reasons and attractive ways to bring people in while the downtown is being built over the next 5 or 7 or 10 years is really important. So it's, whether it's, temporary structures or temporary space that shifts, that it feels like it's becoming something that's ours. Well, it's becoming something rather than, we're all kind of waiting for a long time for the curtain to fall and the ribbon to be cut and it's perfect. I think the idea that it grows with us and we find ways to take advantage of it are really important. And I think that may be more programming than design, but it just strikes me that, there's a gap between the vision we're talking about now, and people are excited to start to be there. And I think that they'll appreciate it more when it's finished if they spent time there while it was being built.
Okay.
If I could just expand on that, I think that's a concern for me and a big challenge for the project is that we can't possibly get this right out of the gate. And I think there was some Bruce might have offered this comment earlier, is the ability to kind of modify and evolve in the future. So I appreciate we're not talking about, huge, acres upon acres of land here. So I think that's going to be a challenge, is to build in some flexibility to react to the market, to kind of settle in and react to the community's needs. The other point I just raised on this measure of success is really kind of year-round activity and attention, not just day and night, but year-round is the seasonal component. I guess I see, yeah, that's kind of mentioned, but I think it should be accentuated.
Yeah, Karen, I have two things, and they're maybe counterintuitive, but I would say measure of success is congestion and parking problems. Because successful downtowns have traffic problems and they have parking problems. And I think it's important not to be afraid of those things when you're designing a downtown. And I think it's very easy for municipalities to be afraid of those when they're actually signs of success.
I think it might be important to make a note sort of above and beyond just the foot traffic too. I think we're all very hopeful for sort of this vibrant, sort of thriving area. But my hope is that with sort of half an eye on at what cost do we arrive at high volume and high traffic. I think Scarborough in a lot of ways is hoping for, and maybe at least as a resident from the town, I'm hoping for something that can sort of put Scarborough on the map and make it less of maybe a sort of a pass-through town. I think there's a lot of people who visit regionally and they just head straight to the beach and then they leave. And then there's a lot of people who bomb up Route 1 to get to Portland, and maybe finding something or creating something here that can create some staying power and give us, a little bit of a point of pride as residents. I think in addition to, I don't want to discount the idea of the, wanting a vibrant and thriving area, but in addition to that, I think we could maybe have something that can give us as residents sort of when we say, hey, we're from Scarborough, they're like, oh, I've been there. I went to the downtown, or I remember this about my experience there. We have, I think, great areas now, but as we've mentioned, we're quite fragmented, but to have sort of that center point of the town that kind of defines it, I think would be nice.
All right, any last thoughts for everyone? John as council liaisons, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
So I think you've got it here in a lot of different places, but to me, success is you've created an interesting place where people and businesses want to be. And you can measure that by, traffic or, scarcity of available resources. But I think that's the idea, is that you're trying to create a focal point.
I just want to add, overall, this has been an excellent conversation and discussion, and thank you, Karen, for being the scribe and helping facilitate. I think everything that was shared today, I'm 100% behind. I would be happy if 50% of this was able to be brought to life. So, being realistic a little bit that, this is really great principles. I'm excited to see what Goody Clancy does with this and how they bring it to life. And then just kind of go from there.
Well, I think as Tom said, this is evolving and building over time. It's not going to happen overnight. And the committee is defining, a vibrant place to work towards. So Travis, I think, my job is to put all this back in context, and also ask any committee members if maybe by Friday, if you want to add your thoughts to the bigger list. And even if you're not ready to add anything to it, I suggest you read through it, because again, there's some just beautiful descriptions of what the downtown could be. So it's good reading. And that's it. And I'll get this all cleaned up and back out to everyone.
Can I add just one more point before we close this
Sure,
document?
absolutely.
Did we add the dog park? Because there are a lot of people behind it, and then I did got a lot of feedback about the dog park. I don't know whether it actually fits into the downtown asset,
Yeah.
but that's also a good opportunity. And through dog park, at least you can get the corporate, either marketing or advertisements or some financial or donations can be formulated to the town to financially help more to build something like that. That is one. And while I was living in Dubai, what I found was when they do a lot of like Dubai shopping festival, Dubai festival, on the different themes of events, there was a lot of attention paid towards how can they attract big corporations to display the advertisements. That is basically money to maintain the downs, rather than trying to capture a lot of big chunk of money by increasing the higher rates of parking fees or charging the people who are actually visiting. That may be a negative factor. People do like, oh, that is too expensive area to go, so I would probably rather than go to some other place. We need to be mindful of that also. So maybe this is an opportunity where we can have some areas where we can get a lot of corporate advertisements or marketing to visibly present themselves and then attract the people towards them also. I might not be able to explain clearly. Probably you might understand what I'm trying to say.
No, we got it.
And then I can tell you, for dog park, IDEX is definitely going to sponsor, because there are people at the higher level who are behind that aspect. That I spoke to them.
I'm writing that down. IDEX wants to sponsor.
Right. Is
Maybe
that
keep it in the
finding,
bracket.
Karen? So thank you, Karen. I think that this was a phenomenal exercise, and I'm happy to work with you over the course of the week on the finished product. I think it would be great if we can deliver it to Dan and Rocky, by next Tuesday. So Goody Clancy and Crossroads have a week to just absorb it. But I think the other half of, or the other, hopefully 10% of this conversation was discussing who else we may want to invite with us in 2 weeks. And so the only suggestion that I remember came up 2 weeks ago was somebody from the sustainability side. I wonder if anybody else has thoughts on who we may want to ask to join us. Obviously, Jay Chase, we want to be there. Who else? Tom, I saw your hand up.
Just a question maybe for Dan and Rocky. As it relates to invitees, I think there's other parties that will be really interested in the discussion. Do you anticipate having them actually participate and be involved? So I think we could maybe even expand the list bigger if there's a list of invitees that don't have the expectation of being actively involved.
I'll come in like 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't given a ton of thought, Tom, in terms of expanding the group. It's as much making sure the outcome is reported out, to really key committees and boards who are reviewing other aspects of the project. This group is super educated at this point. So I think maybe if you're inviting others, it's a different level of participation, maybe comment at the end or something versus.
Yeah, maybe the way we could do it, rather than the whole sustainability committee, we'll have Jamie Fitch, our state sustainability coordinator, who serves as the staff support, be the attendee. So she can relate that back, and we can pull that committee in as needed as it gets more fine-grained.
Yeah.
Kim?
Do we need anybody from public safety there, or is that too specific?
No, I think Sergeant Steve Thibodeau would be a good person. He's tasked with doing kind of community relations stuff. So I think, having him there really just to hear the conversation. I don't know that he'll contribute much, would be helpful.
Or anybody else that we think would really contribute? It's okay.
Dan, you mentioned the planning board's interested. Do you think it's helpful to have them there?
I think it's helpful for them to get brought up to speed and have a chance to provide input. I'm thinking they'll be, if they're added kind of now, they might be kind of handicapped because of all the work this committee's done and how familiar this committee is. So,
no, and as I think about it, ex parte, they're going to be asked to vote on your master plan. It's probably not appropriate for them to actually be actively involved in the design.
yeah, I mean, I sort of see a report out from either the Downs or maybe Karen and the Downs to the planning board. So they're brought up to speed and can weigh in, or just be brought up to speed. But after this workshop where this committee can be the lead participants.
It strikes me that the plan that we see from Goody Clancy is likely to change based on input and discussion that evening. So maybe it's that next 2.0 version that we might want to circulate more widely.
Maybe the planning board could be, like you're saying, with maybe there's committees that have liaisons similar to the council for that next bite at the apple, you know, where a member of the planning board participates, a member of, you know, SEDCO, any committee that you guys think is appropriate. That might be a way to handle it too.
Tom, just a functional question. I assume this is a public meeting. If members of the public choose to observe, they're welcome to do so. We'll hold a period for public comment. We'll open and close the meeting like normal. So I think should it draw some attention, we just want to be prepared that we may have some public interest.
Yeah, exactly right. So we should be thinking of the venue and the logistics, but yes, it'll be a public meeting that we'll have an agenda and we'll have a formal. Do we think it'd be helpful to get this videotaped? That adds a challenge.
I think if it's not required, then there's no reason for us to do that.
Okay.
If Dan and Rocky, if you think there'd be value in it to go back to, but I mean, I think Goody Clancy would probably know best what they need. And, you know, for matters of doing our sunshine responsibility, I don't think we need to add that.
No, it'll be a duly advertised meeting. I think people just become accustomed to having, who knows, we could be a YouTube sensation. There could be thousands of people watching us as we speak. But I really see this as a workshop and a work session, right? So I think we ought to be fairly selective. It might be best for me to invite the key members of staff that support these other committees in the first instance, and they can collect and maybe provide some input as needed, but certainly report back to their groups and find a way for them to plug into this a little more focused.
I think that makes sense, Tom.
Okay.
Staff level representation makes sense.
Great.
Is there anything, Dan or Rocky, is there anything else you want to talk about that meeting? I know you kind of mentioned your idea for format earlier. Anything else we should be expecting or preparing for?
Well, we're planning on having it at the grandstand, and we would like to nail down time, obviously, and some of those logistics, whether we just do it at 6:30 or if we want to start earlier, so that we're not cutting it short and leaving enough time for participation. We could even maybe get some refreshments or if we start early. So I think it's the logistics we want to figure out, and then we can work with Tom and Karen on an agenda, in more detail, or you, Travis, however you guys want to do that. We do want to have Goody Clancy kind of do a pretty comprehensive presentation to start, but also do a lot of facilitation, and get some good feedback and have discussion. So I think it's just kind of devils in the details, figuring out time and agenda, etc.
Yeah, I mean, typically Tom and Tom and I work on the agenda in the interim, which we can do with you and with Karen. But I guess while we have everybody here, how do we feel about starting early? I support it, but I want to make sure that we aren't running into conflicts. Does anybody have a problem with starting, Dan, 5:30? Give everybody a chance to get out of work for those who are actually going to work, or what time makes sense to start if we want to start on the early side?
I was just thinking that this probably would go 2 to 2.5 hours versus an hour and a half. So I want it to work for the committee for full participation. So we can start whenever. I just throw it out there as an idea to make sure we have enough time to have a good discussion.
Well, Dan, you said refreshments. Does that mean food? You're going to feed us?
You gonna give us
We'll feed
pizza?
ya.
How does everybody
We'll
feel
feed
about 5:30 at the Grand?
5:30 to 8 feels fine to me.
Yeah, me too. That feels good.
If that arises as a conflict for anybody, please just let us know as soon as possible, but we'll plan on 5:30 at the grandstand.
5:30 at grandstand, right?
Mhm.
And
We'll
master.
bring the beer. We'll bring the pizza.
We'll provide some details as to which entrance to go through and such. Okay.
Yeah, more forthcoming about the logistics. Okay, well, I think if that covers it for planning for the meeting, we can move on to public comment. I don't see anybody in the attendees window. Tom, am I missing anything? Any members of the public?
You are not. No one here.
Great. Thanks, everybody. It's been a great, heavy meeting, and I think a lot of good came out of it. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in person in 2 weeks into this exercise. So I'm guessing those are waves of goodbye, maybe seconds. Oh, those are, you want to speak? Sure.
On behalf of John Cloutier and John Anderson, a shameless plug to remember to vote on the budget next Tuesday.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Or no pizza for you. No
Those
pizza.
thousands of YouTube fans, make sure you vote. Great. Okay. Well, is there anything else? Seeing none, make sure you vote. I look forward to seeing you all at this grandstand in 2 weeks. I accept a motion to adjourn by myself. We're adjourned.
Second, all
Thank
those
you.
in favor?
Yes.